went over the beginnings of the Cooper family with the son Thomas from George, the slave master, George Cooper, and Granny Lett. And from there um, to Alex Sr., and from there to Roy and Louise, who we're celebrating today with their 12 children, and you are one of those children. Can you tell me, what was life like for Roy and Louise in East Mississippi? This would have been around 1900.
I would gather that in the early 1900s, with the event of the Night Riders or the formative days of the Ku Klux Klan, intimidation along racial line was apparent, and the struggle to exist within the economic systems that was afforded at that time made life a real difficult undertaking.
Very difficult undertaking. Did the family own anything, or were they simply dispossessed like most people were from the plantations when slavery broke up?
Tradition with our family structure indicates that the family had properties that was handed down as heir properties through Thomas Cooper.
That's right. Thomas was son of the slave master, so he actually inherited property.
That is our assessment as we see it today.
That's what you think, okay? So you say the land was taken away. What did you do to try to get the land back, or try to prevent this from happening?
Well, there was no preventative technique in vogue at the time, but the family did fight the usurpation of the property with a lawsuit that ended in my grandfather, Alex, having been incarcerated in jail for 6 months.
So you mean if you had the nerve to try to go to court, you wound up being threatened and jailed?
Or even killed.
Or killed?
Yes.
Was anybody threatened with death?
No, but there is a idiom in the family that was supposedly passed on to my grandfather as he was encouraged to move away from his surroundings, that, quote, it would take a very Christian-hearted white to give a black his just due. So that is a part of the family heritage.
So they were told, of course, that they should stay out of court, as you indicated. And this, of course, was in a way a veiled death threat, would you say?
I would say yes.
Yeah, so there was, I mean, they knew what was meant and knew that it was time to leave. Did they go elsewhere in Mississippi at that point?
Well, migration that started was often a leapfrog process. They left the hills of Mississippi and moved to the Delta.
To the Delta, and what did they find there? Was it any better?
Well, the Delta was the heart of the cotton culture, and intimidation was even more rigorous as we have come to understand the history of this region.
So they encountered even more intimidation, and where did they go then?
They left Mississippi and moved to Arkansas, and Arkansas was a paradise of sort in as much as it offered opportunity to lease farm land as a leaser farmer, as well as sharecropping.
Oh, all right. So were they in a position then to accumulate capital?
Yes, my grandfather being somewhat an efficient operator with a family basically of boys, were able to come to Arkansas, engage in cotton farming, accumulate a capital base to purchase equipment which would include mules, wagons, and farm equipment to operate a farming operation of 80 plus acres.
Very interesting. Were other blacks trying to move in those directions? What other movements were there taking place, if any?
Yes, you'll find during this time, especially in Arkansas, there was a black person of note by the name of Clay Brooks, who had put together a plantation of sorts. He had learned the trade of lumbering and had gone into a swamp-like land and cleared it of his timber, and he developed properties by which he and his family supported themselves and others comparable to the system at that time.
Did you hear anything of Booker Washington in Arkansas?
The influence of Washington in the early 1900s was very paramount in the black community, especially those with education. References were readily made to the Atlanta meeting where he declared, "Cash your buckets where you are."
Uh-huh. So did that mean work the land and do it well?
It meant the whole concept. Washington, as a leader of his time, encouraged property ownership. And with property ownership, he assured the followers that in due time they would be afforded every opportunity that was afforded any other property owner.
Did you ever hear the term Black Awakening used?
Well, as I read that period of time, it is referred to Black Awakening, the Black Renaissance, the movement to become independent through effort. You'll note in the period, the late 30s up until 1940s, that blacks had control and equity in 16 million acres of farmland. Blacks constituted about 47% of the total farmers in the nation. And so we're going to see in the out-migration from the farm a lessening of blacks in this regard and a lessening of blacks in real property ownership.
Speaking of migration, with all the success in Arkansas, did Roy and Louise remain in Arkansas?
No, with the event of World War I, and there's the urge to move into the Bootheel of Missouri, an area that had been recently being developed through drainage of the swampy lands, the erection of a series of interconnecting drainage canals, and this area, which was the uppermost reaches of the Mississippi, afforded opportunity to produce cotton without being threatened by the cotton boll weevil.
Cotton boll weevil. Now the weevil destroyed the crop nearly in Mississippi and some other places. Why didn't that happen in Missouri?
Well, in the Bootheel of Missouri, the winters were severe enough to break the boll weevil life cycle. So unlike points in the deep south and the scourge of the boll weevil from 1914 to 1917, this area was relatively free. It was still inundated with woods also, so the whole infestation of the cycle had not taken place.
Oh, I see. Very interesting. I read, I don't know if this is right, that 400,000 acres of prime farmland opened up as the basis of that drainage and levee system.
This is, in the general sense, yes. This area encompasses the 6 southeasternmost counties of the state of Missouri, which even unto this day contributes 30% of the commodity crops in the state. So it is still a very fertile region.
That's fascinating. Now we're moving on up into the 30s, as you say. Let's just take a look because you talked about the Bootheel and where this is on the map for some of our viewers who geography like mine is uncertain. Where the Bootheel is?
The Bootheel of Missouri is the area referred to in the northeastern part of Arkansas. It is approximately 180 miles south and east of St. Louis, and it follows the trail of the Mississippi River.
We said that you hear it say that cotton is king around here. You mentioned the cotton crop. Why do they use that? Obviously, that's been the main crop.
Well, in the development of the area, Cotton was a crop that employed intensive labor. It was a crop that two of the manufacturers and the process took place in the area. In addition to harvesting and cultivating the crops, which required lots of labor, then the first process of extracting the seed from the lint, ginning the cotton, as well as compressing the bale to carry it on to the textile mill. So it was king cotton as a crop in as much as it afforded total employment opportunities for the total society. The remnants of a cotton picking attachment that made its way known in the area in the late 1950s. This started the second out-migration in the area, and that a cotton picker displaced farm laborers. The units now that are being applied are 4 rows, and it's not attachment, it's a 4-row unit, and it'll display projectedly 600 people. 600
people. This machine took the place of 600 people.
Yeah, well, that's this machine and its improvement did.
600 people. So what was going to happen then to all those people that suddenly, you know, there weren't jobs for them really?
Well, that started the second out-migration in the area. Well, going to the cities looking for jobs that could replace the farm employment. And there was no adjustment made locally to meet this. So this gives rise to the situation that you now have.
The situation that you now have, all right, which is a lot of homes that are owned in the area because the federal government was forced really to step in and to try to provide for people who were homeless.
Well, I think it goes further. I think it goes to movement towards a dependent system or the welfare state. When you took removed from the area the ability to work and earn, you have created the greatest industry which is now in the area, and that's the industry of transfer payment, which includes the likes of AFDC, General Relief, the Social Security, and the variations thereof.
But not everybody who got those payments was poor. What about is it the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, that was supposed to give relief to the people that didn't have jobs and were hungry?
Well, now your references to the real cause of the people to participate in what was, quote, the roadside demonstration. In fact, it was not, I would think, having grown up in the area, it would be accurately titled the roadside force off the land on the road, and rather than a demonstration of people. But to answer your question specifically, subsidy was paid for non-production of cotton, and those owners who control the flow and the business of the farm received the subsidy.
Okay, let's get another one of your brothers to talk about this roadside demonstration.
Okay.
This sounds pretty interesting, and a lot of people don't know about it.
Chuck!
Cut. Which one of the 12 are you?
I'm Charles Winston Cooper.
Charles Winston Cooper. All right, Alex was talking about the farmers and roadside demonstrations. Do you remember any of that?
I remember very specifically.
Now, well, now, what date was it that they took place?
Around 1936.
Wow, okay. Now, by the way, what is your occupation? You're one of the 12 children of the Coopers.
I'm a practicing physician.
You're a physician? What is your specialty?
Family practice.
Family practice, okay. Any other doctors in the family of that 12?
Yes, there's one brother that is a physician. There's one nephew that is a physician. There's one niece that is a physician. There's 2 daughters of mine that are dentists. There is several other son-in-laws, MDs, dentists.
Well, a very health-conscious family. And you practice in Jefferson City, doctor?
I practiced in Jefferson City for 26 years.
Right, okay. So you say, was it 1930?
1936.
1936 that you remember these roadside demonstrations. Yes. Let's just take a look at this land out here to see what it looks like. All right. Now, what crops are these growing out here now?
What crops are growing now? These are soybeans here. These are soybeans growing here, but at the time when this was going on, the crops hadn't been planted because at the time of the roadside demonstration, the land had been cotton, but the stalks had been cut. And on this side, I remember specifically, was also cotton. Every Sunday morning, my grandfather, who lived roughly, exactly 5 miles straight north, would come to Hayti to pick up the paper. We lived next door to him. He would pick up his grandchildren to bring them. And so we would notice, and when you cross that little drainage canal right there, then you could see the demonstration of people who were out on the side roads. So he spoke to them. They were about a mile of them.
Excuse me, let me ask you, what highway are we on now, by the way?
This is really not a highway, to be perfectly frank. This is a farm-to-market paved road, so I am not certain the name of the highway.
But we're close to 55, aren't we?
Yes, 55 is less than 2 miles behind you. I-55.
Okay.
Less than 2 miles.
All right. So what did you see out on this road?
Well, the people who had been evicted from their homes as a result of an agricultural act passed in Washington, whereas under President Roosevelt, the farmers were to have money, they call it subsidy, to be subsidized for not producing. And those people who lived on the farm were to share into that. Well, the farm owners, greater than 99%, were white. So they decided that rather than to share the subsidies, they made the black people move out. And the black people had no place to go, so they moved to the roadside. But there were a few blacks who were renting land, and they had some equipment and had a few animals. They worked the land with mules at that time. They brought all of their possessions and their mules to right along there, and that's why they were parked. That's why they had to live. It was early in the spring and was still rainy and cold, but they lived there in makeshift tents, cardboard boxes, and so forth.
Were they in danger of freezing to death and becoming...
Not at this particular time, because this was, I remember specifically, it was in April, just before the cotton was to be planted. It was in April and March that they had to move out. They weren't in danger of freezing at that time because the weather here is such that it is not cold enough to do that.
So, in other words, you had hundreds of people out here up and down the roadside with no place to go.
Well, I don't know the numbers, but it was many families. There was a mile of them or more on the roadside.
Stranded on the road.
Stranded on the road, living out there.
With nowhere to go.
That was
How would people survive in terms of food? They had no bank account.
How they survived, there were people such as my grandfather who knew what was going on with them. They would bring things, the little churches, there were a number of churches, I could point to where they are, would bring things to these people. They had their little meager possession. This is the only way they could survive. They had the little thing that they got. In those days, they would preserve their food stuff. They would can it. They would kill hogs. They would cure their meat. They were on the side of the road. They ate out there with the possessions and the food stuff that they had, and with what people would give them, they would survive on that.
So did they have speeches out here?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I was just a child whether they had official organized speeches. But I knew one thing for sure. They were organized and they had a leader that had them out here. They were coordinated because my grandfather would talk to him.
I read the name of Owen Whitfield.
Yes, I'm right.
Does
That's
that ring
his
a
one.
bell?
Yes.
He was a black labor organizer.
That's true.
Right?
I can recall those names too. But for me to say specifically, I knew him being a child. I could not give the name, but that name I'm very familiar with.
All right, and he organized basically.
They were organized.
A demonstration to protest.
They were organized.
Did anybody in outside of this region hear about the demonstration?
I'm certain that they did, but being that communication at that time was a little different than it is now, I am not so sure how quickly and forceful that was disseminated because we didn't have television at the time, and many people, even around here, didn't even have a radio.
Yeah.
So the dispensation of news at the time, 1936, is far different. And then I think there's another reason. If it was disseminated in local papers, there were many people who weren't able to read. It had to be from mouth to mouth.
So then, though, let's say it was began as a black demonstration and organization. Have you heard of a man named H.L. Mitchell?
Yes.
All right, I understand that Mitchell heard about it and came down here and then went to Washington and got some help in the form of housing for the people.
I am very familiar with that. However, the details, being a child, I am not aware of. I know about that, and I know of the result of what happened as a result of the demonstration along here. For instance, the FSA was then founded, and then Delmo Housing. And Delmo Housing is almost a direct resultant of this. I have a brother who is the CEO of that housing now, and it's a number of those housing projects that are still going, and they were later sold to the people who, some of them lived right along here, or their children or grandchildren.
That's your brother Alex that we
That's-
just spoke with.
That is true. Alex still helps and runs the Delmo Housing, which was a direct outgrowth of the demonstration that you see here. But I think it's only fair to point out that these demonstrations weren't only just right here north of Hayti, they're north of Hayti, but there were other areas in which they were out on the roadside also.
Oh, all over this area, in other
Oh yes,
words.
but this was by far the largest one, to my
Yeah.
knowledge.
And did you see, were the people allowed to demonstrate peacefully, or did you get wind of any trouble that they encountered?
Well, you see, demonstration as we know today wasn't happening here. It was certainly peaceful. Peaceful in the sense that all they knew to do, all they could do, they were put out, evicted, would just come to the roadside and try to get somebody to plead their case to the higher-ups. Higher-ups meaning somebody in Washington.
Which H.L. Mitchell did.
That's exactly
But when
right.
I said peaceful, I mean, did other people leave them in peace to demonstrate, or did other people object to their demonstrating?
Well, I'm
were they-
sure that this happened because I can specifically remember one Sunday morning coming along here while they were out here. Now, I cannot tell you the exact length of time they were here, but they were outside in the road maybe a month. But this one Sunday morning, we drove by going right down this road to Hayti for my grandfather to pick up his paper. We stopped, and my grandfather and my uncle spoke and talked to a number of the people. And two of my brothers jumped out the car just looking. And there were several individuals who had mules. And those people who had their mules, you may be familiar with the old 40-acre mule, these people were renters, and they had some mules. They had their mules here. And so my grandfather talked to this one man, I cannot remember his name, and said something, said, man, that's a good mule there. I have one just like him. So we went to Hayti, was in Hayti like 30 minutes, and when we came back, this particular mule was lying right along down the side of the road, and some of the individuals who had been hit by a car. And my grandfather asked the man, I can't recall his name now, said, what happened? He said, Mr. Cooper, a white man ran by and ran over and hit my mule.
Was
And-
it deliberate?
Oh, it was deliberate. There was no question. I knew then it was deliberate. It hit my mule. And he asked him, he said, was your mule on the road? He said, no, he was long. He said, jumped over and hit my mule and kept going. And I was almost in tears.
So at the
When-
age of 5 or 6, you
I was
saw
6. I saw this. I will
this
never
valuable,
forget it.
beautiful
The only
animal
thing the man had.
lying there,
That's
bleeding
right.
to death.
So he said to my grandfather, he said, Mr. Cooper, what do you think I can do? Do you think of it? He said, no, he will not make it. He will die. Say, if you had a gun, you should shoot him. It's like, he will never recover. So some men, I saw that, help him move the mule to the side of the road, and my grandfather said, Jesse, let's go on. They will take care of it. That's for sure.
Very traumatic
I
memory.
saw it, and I will never forget that.
So, were there only black sharecroppers who were put off the land? Were there whites as well? Poor whites.
Oh, I am certain now along this line here, there were only blacks. You
Uh-huh.
see, if the whites were put out, they wouldn't be in the same area because of the segregated pattern such as we have today that still goes on. But I know that the whites had the same problem, those who were sharecroppers, many of which were. They were put out, and I know that they were having the same or similar problem because the Delmo Housing project that still exists, they, meaning the federal government, built houses and units, same as for the black, for them also. And these units still exist right in Wardell, Missouri now. That is less than 8 miles from this spot.
Yes. So the government finally built housing. So apparently the work of H.L. Mitchell and the demonstration organized by Whitfield did end up in providing
It did.
for people. And so let me just ask one more question. What do you think about people leaving? Some people felt forced to go.
I want to repeat the question. I didn't hear it because of the traffic.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
we are standing right on the road. What do you think about the people having departed and left for the cities?
Well, in a sense, they had no choice in the matter. But now, if you are asking me, were all of the social problems solved as a result of people migrating from where they were living in a strict agrarian society, and now they lived in cluttered situations in cities? From a sociological point of view, my answer would have to say they are not better off. I will give you a specific on that. There is a housing project, or should I say, in St. Louis, Missouri. The housing project, as I know it, was built as a result of some of the things we're talking about here. And it's called Pruitt-Igoe. It's kind of known all over the world. Pruitt-Igoe was a colossal failure where the federal government decided to take people who were displaced, in this case mainly blacks, and build tall units and put those people who had lived on farms all in these housing. What this created is a sociological problem. And anybody who would have known that if you took people who had lived in little shotgun shanties, never rode on an elevator, never used inside plumbing, stacked them up, the things that happened was destined to happen. And I knew that it was going to happen from a situation that I was experiencing during the time when Pruitt-Igoe was being built.
Could you tell us quickly what did happen?
What did happen with Pruitt-Igoe, it got to be a seat of crime and drugs and tear down. It did happen. But there were individuals that knew that this was going to happen before they began to build it and warned against it.
Warned against it. So you feel that the labor arrangement here in the country where everybody works on the farm is much better for a human being in terms of his development.
I think that to say that to labor on a farm is better than to labor in some other vocation is one is better than the other is not the point that I try to make.
Oh, okay.
However, to labor on a farm whereas individuals rearing a family have space for the children to run and play in, have animals that they can see rather than to go to a zoo, have animals that they raise and can raise their products to eat. This is a much better arrangement than to have to live in a place like Pruitt-Igoe where he doesn't even hardly see grass. This is what I'm telling you. And go to a job that he punches a clock on.
And of course, what do you think of the economy in those cities? It was based on what? The people?
The economy in the cities such as St. Louis, Kansas City, and all, at the time when these things was going on, depression was still there. The economy in the cities as of today is based on the production of automobiles, the production of furniture, the production of other consumer items that people need. Therefore, farm machinery, therefore individuals who live in these situations and have no way to raise a garden or anything just to do this and no real place to recreate, no real place to go out and walk a dog, you see, so you create a social problem when you crowd people up and put them in a situation like that.
As a doctor, do you feel you see a lot of social problems that you think are created by the crowded cities?
Well, in the city that I practice in, my answer would have to be no, because I happen to practice medicine for 26 years in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is Missouri capital, and we do not have such a problem as that. However, our two major cities, St. Louis, and should I say,
Chicago?
East St. Louis, Chicago, and all other major cities, and may I remind you that Los Angeles, the same problem. We knew would have to happen when people are displaced and living in situations like that.
And you're saying, as you said, doing jobs that are demeaning,
Absolutely.
unfulfilling,
Absolutely.
boring, or no jobs.
And no place to go.
And no jobs.
And no job. You see, as I understand it from the statistics that I read along this line, roughly, say, more than 90% of Americans live in urban areas occupying less than 5% of the land. people being that close, just in of itself, would be a potential to cause a problem such as happened on the 29th of April 1992. With everything going well, you still have this powder keg. And then when you couple this with 40% of blacks and Hispanics out of a job and being beaten and all of this, it must happen. It's surprising to me why it hadn't happened sooner. And it's surprising why the situation when these things kind of are calculated by the white structure. They know this, such as I know it and you know it.
Would you recommend people moving back to the...
It would be very wise if, a lot of them would like to do that, if the federal government would some kind of way finance some housing that would move them out of the urban areas. Now, the whites do this, they move to the suburbs, but many blacks and Hispanics don't have the finances to do that. This is what whites do, the urban, they move out of it because they financially can do it. Yes, it would be better if housing some kind of way would be so that they wouldn't be clouded up, such as Pruitt-Igoe.
Yes, thank you. And of course, some few blacks do move to the suburbs.
Those who can afford it.
And,
those who can afford it. There is no difference in the behavior, only on an individual basis, on what people desire in a capitalistic society. They do what they can do based on the finance they have. There are some people who might well like to live in Manhattan, right in the center of it. But those who can afford it, who are rearing children, if he could opt for a place where he could have his children out and running and playing outside the city, I'm sure in the high 90s would choose that.
well, thank you very much. Let's take a quick look at some of this beautiful countryside. Some of this beautiful countryside that we've passed by. We're going to turn around here and go back and let you point out some of these sites that are so dear to your memory.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
This is my grandfather rented and operated this land right here. The land right there most probably is still owned by Jewish people, Khans. The man who was operating it, his name was Johnson, Dan Johnson. He operated this and he had only black sharecroppers. There were numerous black sharecroppers with him. Who helped him farm the land. They farmed it mainly in cotton. At that time, they didn't really grow soybeans here and very little corn. They grew just enough corn to have corn to feed their hogs with and corn to feed their mules and horses to raise the land. Corn in this area was not a cash crop, such as in Iowa or Upper Missouri. But this was the land of cotton, like you see over there. White cotton.
All right, for those viewers who've never seen cotton growing. And quite beautiful. I see some lovely little pink flowers.
It's in blossom now. And some of it is materially open.
I didn't realize that there was a cotton blossom.
Oh, yes. Now this is soybeans here. This is soybeans and this is soybean on this side. You see, but now this area on both sides, about every 100 yards, there was a sharecropper's house.
Every 100 yards, a sharecropper's house.
Oh, yes.
That's how much labor was needed.
Was needed. All of the farming and all of the production of cotton was done totally by hand. They had to chop the cotton, pick the cotton, and cultivate the cotton. The cultivation was done by 2 mules and a cultivator. But the chopping of the cotton, meaning getting the weeds out of it, was done by black labor. And picking the cotton was done by black labor by hand.
Now, in some cases, there was white labor, too.
Oh, sure. You see, there is no significant difference. Fluvial means water laid.
Oh.
Less than 5 miles to the east, where I'm pointing here, is the Mississippi River, the father of water.
Oh, right.
So you can put a pump down less than 20 feet, and all the water you need, you can have it. They don't have force pumps here, lift pump. You can get water, so water is not a problem here. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's one of the things that made it such a rich prime area.
The reason that it's so rich, there's some of the richest land in the world,
Now,
with some of the poorest people.
Now, by sharecropping, it meant that you gave half of what you...
Well, that might...
Why don't you explain it, all right?
Sharecrop means an individual who is working for a landowner and he just share some of the profit. Doesn't mean 50% with the person who do the work. Now, 50%, believe me, some of them got far less than that.
All right.
But he
because-
furnished, the landowner would furnish the house and would give the sharecropper some funds of food during the winter so that he can carry over until such time as he can work, and he pay him by the day. By the day meaning working from sun up to sundown. That's what by the day. They had sharecroppers and then they had day workers. The day worker was less than the sharecropper.
So you mean it wasn't an 8-hour day like we have?
There's no 8-hour day on farms
so
even today.
Then again at like 6 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning?
From sun to sun, from when you
And
could
run
see
till
till you couldn't see.
8:30 and 9 o'clock at night?
Till you couldn't see.
So you could work a 16-hour day.
Oh, of course,
out
I
here.
worked a many of them myself.
You did?
Of course I did. You see that? Now this area is very interesting. An individual who was rich, who owned this, and probably today the family, named Acom, they call him Cap Acom. He owned thousands of acres, and they had a big store here, and all along here was such as slave quarters.
Oh.
And he had...
Did you see?
Oh, I saw them all the
You
time
saw
because I went to
slave
school.
quarters?
Well, they really weren't slave quarters, but they were same as they had in slave quarters. These were day
exactly
hands.
the same.
They're the exact same.
So
These
what
were
you're saying is that really slavery continued in a sense.
It's peonage, the same thing. Peonage. They call it peonage, the exact same thing. And down behind that store is a brick store. They had a big store. And then here's a gin.
Yeah.
I came to Blue Valley with you. A gin will drive by is a machine that separates the lint from the cotton, the same gin. It's been modified. And the black people ran the gin. The general's name was George Gill. And the guy who ran the press was named Mac Morgan, both older than my father. They ran the gin all the way.
Was it a safe occupation?
Oh yes, very safe.
Oh,
they knew how to do it. They were engineers. There's
No,
the
I see
gin.
it.
Netherlands gin.
And
I
how
was
many
born
years
in...
has it been here?
I cannot say that it was here when I was born.
All right.
But this has been modified. Yet my father and my brothers brought cotton to suck it, and there's a cotton picker.
Oh,
See,
there's a cotton picker.
There's a cotton picker.
Let's back up and take a... There's a currently
That's
functioning cotton
a
picker.
4-row cotton picker. 4-row cotton picker.
Now that would do the work of how many people?
That right there?
Yes.
Oh, literal thousands.
That would do the work of thousands of people.
There it is, thousands.
So-
It picks 4 rows at a time, just run and get it. That's a cotton
you
picker.
had all these
John
people-
Deere cow cotton picker. There it is. See, there it is.
All these people, then 1,000 people could be put out of
Oh,
work
of
by
course,
that
that one machine, of course.
And of course, you had no Social Security then, right?
None.
And no wage, no relief money. You had nowhere to go, no food, no nothing. You were sitting out on the road, depending on what the little church could
That was
supply
it.
you.
Exactly. The other machine you see there, that's the combine. The other green machine.
Now, what does a combine do?
A combine is a machine that is used to harvest soybeans and wheat.
Oh.
Yes. So this country got soybeans now and cotton. They use one machine for the soybeans and the other machine. Yeah. This
Now,
right
what's
here
all
is
that?
equipment. That's equipment that used in the gin. They're called stands. Those were older ones when they wear so long. Those stands, when the process of ginning goes, these piece of machinery there separates the lint from the seed. Now it is interesting about the invention of the cotton gin. There's a man from Yale, such as the man who runs our country, he's from Yale. This man's name was Eli Whitney.
Yeah.
Eli Whitney was a Yalie, you understand? But he happened to be going down in the South. He was an engineer. And the blacks, not only at that time, before the invention of the cotton gin, had to pick the cotton, then sit up in barns and take their hands and pull the lint from the seed.
Yeah.
But there was a black fellow had found a way with a little machine to keep from they were separated. And Eli Whitney saw this. Eli Whitney got credit for the invention of the cotton gin, but I want you to know, if you know black history, a black man did it. He carried it back. Of course, Eli Whitney is also, I have to give him credit, the father of mass production. The Springfield rifle that we know. He decided this, that I'll let people who know how to make stocks, and while the walnuts are, you make the stock, this guy make the barrel, and we'll assemble it in one way, and then we'll put it somewhere else, so that these people will assemble it. So therefore, you got people who could make gun stocks, people who could make barrels, then people who could assemble. So he is really the father of the assembly line, Eli Whitney of Yale. But Eli Whitney really did not invent the kind of black man did that.
That's a really interesting piece of history.
Now, right now, this little area here was slave quarters, little shotgun houses.
Yeah. And
Shotgun.
later the sharecroppers occupied those.
That's right.
Yeah.
And day labor lived there. And over there, where you see that little clump of bushes, that's where I started the school.
You started the school over there.
That's it. The school is gone.
The school is gone now.
The school is gone. The school is
How
not.
many people attended?
In the total school, I suspect there was 100 people.
100 people.
But they couldn't come to school every day. They had summer school.
Why couldn't they come every day?
They had to walk to school totally. There was
How
no,
far?
they had to walk from where we were sitting. You remember what we showed you? Like 3 miles. And the little children 6 years old in bad weather couldn't make it.
Oh. So how many,
That's the graveyard. It's not taken care of. But this is where, it's the plantation graveyard.
oh.
There's there. You can find maybe a few stones there now.
Plantation graveyard.
That's
That
it.
would be really
That's where
interesting
they cultivated.
If they cut that down,
They-
you know,
they-
someday
you don't know
we
the
can get
mark.
in there and see who
That's right.
who it was.
They
that
are
was
laying
buried
there. Blacks. I know a
Yeah.
number of them laying
Oh,
there.
really? You know people buried?
Sure, I
You
know.
people who were slaves? Or-
Well, you see, I know.
free.
Yes, I know one slave there. I knew 2 slaves in my life.
Yeah.
I knew 2 slaves. Uncle Eli Mitchell lies there.
and who was
I
the
know he
slave?
was a slave. He was a slave sold 2 times because he told me.
Yeah, yeah.
He lies right there. He was a slave, born in Georgia. He lived on my grandfather's place.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, you know, when we're talking about, okay, slave quarters,
In there. But the
you mean
sharecroppers-
theoretically, that's what the
Theoretically.
books say it was
That-
half.
but,
So are
yeah.
you telling me it wasn't half?
They shared with you
Uh-huh.
what they wanted you to have.
So it may have been a tenth or 1/20.
Oh, yes, that half. I don't know who started that.
Gotten ripped off.
Oh, that's why they had to move. Oh, golly,
What
yes.
did you do if you realized you were getting cheated?
They moved somewhere else.
Uh-huh.
I went to the city. They just like the Underground Railroad. When he saw and he knew, those who could count and knew that he's being ripped off, he just like Johnson.
Okay.
It's right there, less than a mile. That's what he read, 320, a half a section.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So when then Alex said he
he-
rented up
oh,
to
yeah,
2,000 acres.
Oh, yeah.
And he
Those-
supervised tenants
Oh,
in
he
his
did.
own
Oh,
right.
yeah, he did. Oh, yeah, he did. You know, over time as he grew. But the first that he had was just when he first started, 1924, was 1924, when he first was right by that line of trees.
Yeah,
That line of trees
yeah.
was 320 acres. And we don't have the time to go up there now because it's
well,
time. Although I wouldn't say that picking cotton would be any more character building than, say, working in construction or working anywhere else or working on an assembly line.
But you think
Honest work that gave you physiological effort and things that you like to do. But there's a difference with cotton. You were out in the open air to do that.
And it's
People
fresh.
they did it at their own pace. Many of them enjoyed doing it.
So how do you all the schooling you would have liked initially, but you have doctors, other healthcare providers, engineers, professional athletes, chief executive officers. They grew up right around this cotton growing territory and struggle under the sun. What do you think about the family that?
Well, you
enabled
see,
you
some
to-
of these struggles that is going on today is no different than the struggles going on in
Yeah.
1865.
Right.
But to say personally that my personal family endured it just like we all endure today, but we understand it. But you see, my grandfather, my grandmother, those people all themselves went to college. You see what I'm saying? And so we all went to college, that was for sure.
So you
But
think education is a big...
Oh, it's one of the best weapons. But it doesn't relieve you or get you away from some of the planned kind of activity that goes on today. Or it doesn't relieve any of us from the thought process that is going on today, that is what whites think about blacks or what blacks think about whites. But the difference
Which
is...
is destructive, you mean.
Oh, yes.
And hurtful.
It's hurtful, without a doubt.
Listen, let me ask you this. We hear a lot of talk in some places about, what about self-help? Why don't you help yourselves? Was there a big self-help project? Have there been big self-help projects
Well,
out here?
there is no question of that. Now, I would think this, and I just would say it because of my family pride. They self-help themselves. And the thing was written about my father many times, and grandfather. Here is an individual who lifted himself by his own bootstraps. And I heard my father making a comment at Lincoln University when somebody introduced him like that to make a speech. And he got up and he said, well, what about all those people who don't have boots? How can they lift themselves? because he was aware of individuals who were totally without hope or without shoes. I heard him say that. Say, what about the individuals who don't have boots?
And a positive start because you own land to begin with.
Yes.
As the son of the slave master and plantation owner.
Well, you see.
You own land and received education.
Yes.
So what about those that didn't get that?
He didn't have boots. He couldn't raise himself. In particular in a system who had decided that they want to keep it that way. You see, a system who want to get somebody down on the street and beat him up and show it on television. That's not a chance thing. This is a thing that's going on. Misusing. Oh, the Rodney King thing. Yeah. That didn't just happen. They were deciding to do this when they saw that they were chasing the black. So even going to the emergency room. So I knocked a home run on you, and the person was unconscious.
So do you see this, when you look at that on television, do you see the beating of slaves?
The same thing. The same identical
the killing
thing.
Of mules,
the same thing. It goes on. They are not hiring a person to do something. Or when I walked in stores many times with my wife, who is unquestionably black, going in stores, just places we travel. Not this trip. We're on vacation now. Yeah. Going to stores. And when you walk in the store, if that security begin to trail behind you to walk, how many times have I been in Nevada, California, and I say, look, darling, they're looking. Put my hand on my head, turn around, just K Browns. But other white people in there, they're not doing that.
There was a documentary done recently that I thought was good, which followed a black professional man, through all walks of American life. Through stores, shops, every situation, and they showed that he was treated differently.
Oh, there's no question of that. No question of that. No question. No question of that. Not only that, but they are discouraged. They are discouraged by the system to register to vote. And I quote you, they are discouraged to not participate. I can recall very recently, President Bush vetoed a bill that would have allowed people, when they got a license to drive a car, to register at time. But President Bush, maybe for other reason also, but how could that hurt anybody to participate in this government?
Yet, according to Mayor Hume, President Bush is making plans to place a detention facility in this area, which would bring a number of jobs. Mayor Hume says that he could not compete with inviting industry here, but this type of facility he feels the government would place, and it would create a lot of industry and education.
Well, I'm not to comment on things that I do not know, but both President Bush and Mayor Hume, who I know very well, they are politicians. We must have those. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
For political expediency might have been the reason why President Bush vetoed the registration when you get your driver's license. Political expediency.
Yes.
But for the good of the country, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So if all of us could participate, we'd have a better country.
My last quick question is, self-help projects. Has the federal government encouraged self-help projects in this region?
Well, I have not really lived here since I was 16 years old, but I come down all the time. There has been good self-help projects, but when they have had or have shown, I happen to specifically know this, that it was going to make inroads into people lifting themselves, there has been federal interference that killed the project. I know of that.
Yes, and we're talking about under various presidents.
Oh, yeah, right. Under this specific president, I cannot point to you any specific program that the Bush administration has done to stifle it. However, some of the bureaucracy in medicine under Bush is atrocious.
Well, all right. Thank you very much, Doc.